Welcome back to another episode of Archie's Sonic Character Files as we explore the histories of the inhabitants on planet Mobius. In this episode, we take a look at the history of the trio of thieves known as the Babylon Rogues. This is probably the most interesting episode I've made, mainly because despite being characters that originated from Sonic games, I've always been more familiar with their Archie Sonic counterparts. Yeah, I kinda sucked on the Sonic Riders games back then, but we'll get more into that later. Besides, with all the recent stuff that's been happening with these birds, I figured it was a good time to cover them now. The Babylon Rogues made their first appearance in issues 163 and 164, in the two-part story simply called Sonic Riders. Jet the Hawk is on the run after stealing some of Robotnik's tech, but he is soon captured by his robots. The evil doctor is impressed with Jet's skills on his extreme gear, and offers him a deal: work for him, trash Sonic, and he'll live. Jet agrees to this and gives Sonic a bad time, along with his other members being Storm the Albatross and Wave the Swallow. As a trio, they are known as the Babylon Rogues. After the beating, the Rogues state that they are coming to Knothole to trash the place tomorrow, which gives Sonic some time to make it back to Freedom HQ to recover, as well as getting some help from Knuckles and Tails with their own extreme gear technology that Tails has been working on. The next day, it's Team Sonic vs. Team Babylon, with the fate of Knothole hanging in the balance. And then it ends. Yeah, this was originally one of those stories that was made to advertise the newest Sonic game for the time, Sonic Riders in this case, but later on in the Tails Adventure adaptation, they do confirm that the events of this story are canon to Archie Sonic's old timeline. So I guess Team Sonic won, or something. Speaking of which, they later made a cameo near the end of the Tails Adventure adaptation. They planned to do some damage to the Battlebird's airship, but it looks like someone already beat them to it. Even so, Jet is focused on more important things. The next time they'd have a more active role again would be in the Treasure Team Tango story arc. They received signals of the Soul Emerald being close by, and the greedy rogues managed to snatch it away from Team Hooligan, who had previously dealt with Team Rose and Team Dark over the Emerald. The birds and hooligans began fighting over the Emerald, and things only got more chaotic once Team Rose and Team Dark caught up to them. Eventually, the fighting stopped once they tricked the Babylons and the hooligans to be grouped together in one area, and deal with one of Bean's bombs blowing up in their faces. With their extreme gear damaged, a pissed-off Wave drags Jet back to their blimp, lecturing him all the way, with Storm following them as well. The last time we got to see the Babylon Rogues in action would be in the story arc Babylon Rising. In this story, they continue with their lifelong goal in finding a place connected to their past, the Babylon Garden. We also get some additional backstory. As it turns out, these birds used to be members of the Battlebird Armada, who are also looking for the garden. Their leader, the Grand Battle Cuckoo the 15th, wants to find the garden and use its power to rule the skies forever. While Jet shared interest in finding the garden, he wasn't a fan of world domination, just wanting to do his own thing, and was soon sent to the brig for not having the same vision as their grand leader. Wave the Swallow was once the assistant to their chief scientist, Dr. Fukarukov, but she was sent to the brig after she made some unauthorized modifications to their engines. And as for Storm the Albatross, well, he's just not a fan of superior officers. One night, they managed to break out of their cells and decide to go AWOL by hijacking a Zeppelin to take them away. Speedy tried to stop the group from leaving, but he was no match against Jet. Now known as the Babylon Rogues, they would occasionally rough up some Battlebird soldiers they encountered, but most of the time their real passion was traveling the world in search of treasures, and of course find the garden themselves. Back in the present time, the trio find the key to the Babylon Garden, and after a tussle against the temple's guardian, they manage to escape, only to be greeted by their former army. After a lot of chasing around, they are soon put in their place by the Grand Leader. Since they're both after the same goal, he gives them a choice: either rejoin the Armada to serve him again, or die. With no other choice, the rogues go with the former, and hand over the key to their leader. He then uses an ancient Babylon ring to activate the key in order to help them find the garden, and it just so happens to be right underneath New Mobotropolis. As they prepare to dig up the place, the Babylon Rogues are ordered to keep Sonic busy, while the other soldiers keep the rest of the Freedom Fighters busy as well, giving them enough time to fire up the main cannon and destroy Castle Acorn to access the ancient garden. Of course, knowing Jet and his team, they plan to double-cross their leader and take the Babylon Garden for themselves. But they still gotta deal with a pissed-off Sonic. First, Sally gets roboticized again, then Nagas takes over the city, and now all of New Mobiletropolis was put in danger because of their destruction. Yeah, this hedgehog is not having a good day. Despite all of this, they make their way in and activate the garden. To their surprise, they find out that the Babylonian ancestors were actually aliens from another planet, and that the Babylon Garden is actually a spaceship that was left abandoned after it was considered too dangerous thanks to a malfunction to their wormhole generator, a device that could create a black hole and destroy everything. Now that the garden is fully charged, all of Mobius is doomed. Jet tries to stop the robot piloting the garden, but it's no use. The only thing that can stop it now is by removing the key, but before he can do that, Speedy shows up to try and stop it. Not to mention getting the glory of saving Mobius and watching the rogues suffer. But Sonic has had enough of all the space bird stuff and destroys the key. And after issuing them a verbal threat, he leaves the ship, now set on a crash course to the ground, with Speedy and the Babylons leaving as well. So after all that searching, the Babylon rogues are left with nothing but shock over the reveal that their ancestors are aliens. Even so, Jet gets over this reveal to start a new goal by proving that he is the fastest thing in the universe. And that's the end of the Babylon rogues. As for the new timeline, well, they do get referenced here and there, but we never saw them again. And that concludes the history of the Babylon rogues, treasure hunters of the skies. I've always been very mixed about these guys. I just found them tolerable during their short time in Archie Sonic, but after my thoughts have changed over the years, I'm a lot more nicer to these characters. Now, the development process for their first introduction is very interesting. Originally titled In on a Gale, the story was meant to be a more basic adaptation of the Sonic Riders game. But since Sega has a knack for providing little to no information about upcoming Sonic games, all they had to work with at the time was a video game magazine talking about the game and the intro cutscene, which kind of explains why the trio act a little off in their first appearance. Although I do like how the art style replicates the look of the characters from the intro cutscene. A nice touch from artist Tracy Yardley and colorist Josh and Amy Ray. Even so, since their introduction would become canon instead of just the standard advertisement for a game, it does leave us with a bit of a gaping hole in the timeline, with how the outcome happened off screen. Did Sonic call upon the Freedom Fighters to help them out? Was Robotnik pissed off about the failed capture of the Babylons after failing him? I don't know. All we can assume is that Sonic won and the Babylons ran away. In later appearances, they continued to have smaller roles, like showing up halfway through Treasure Team Tango. Around that time, they started to act more like their game counterparts. Jet is the brash and cocky leader, obsessed with money, Storm is the big dumb muscles of the group, and Wave is the smart engineer, who is always trying to keep Jet focused, much to his annoyance from all of her lecturing. We also get this amusing scene where Bean calls him Jettison Q Hawkington. You might think that's Jet's real name in the Archie Sonic universe, but nah, it's just a made-up nickname by Bean. I mean, this is Bean the Dynamite we're talking about here. Despite not being utilized a lot, it's surprising that their last appearance ended on a high note in some ways. They got to feature elements from both Riders and Zero Gravity, as well as giving them some backstory with their connections to the Battlebird Armada. Now, this was something that was established way back in their first appearance. Then we got a glimpse of that connection near the end of the Tails Adventure story arc, and now it comes full circle, showing that they were outcasts in the army, where despite having the same interests as their leader in finding the Babylon Garden, the same couldn't be said on the world domination angle. I'm rather surprised how the ending to this story is a bit anticlimactic when compared to the more dramatic ending in Zero Gravity. Then again, it did give us that chilling moment in seeing a darker side to Sonic, with all that stress he's been dealing with during that time. One thing I liked about Jet in this story was the rivalry against Speedy, a nice clash of the old and new characters who originated from the games. Sometimes Jet would get to upstage him, and other times Speedy would have the upper hand. A real shame that something like this can only happen in Archie Sonic. Nowadays, they can't do that in any other official Sonic media because of some dumb Sega mandate about keeping certain characters exclusive to either classic Sonic or modern Sonic material. And then there's the quest for the Babylon Garden. Yeah, even in Archie Sonic, they stick to the whole deal from the games about them being descendants of the Babylonian aliens and all that jazz. Then again, aliens in Archie Sonic is nothing new. I'm not sure what the general consensus is about the backstory on the Babylon Rogues. I imagine people always scoffed at the idea and that it was just Sega jumping the shark by pulling out the "Aliens did it" card, which is quite ironic considering how nowadays we got Sonic Frontiers establishing the Chaos Emeralds coming from an alien planet, which is even more ironic because it's basically Sega trying to copy off of what Archie Sonic did with the Chaos Emeralds. Anyway, personally, I've always been very meh about this detail. In some ways, it did kind of ruin the characters, where it just became that scenario where a character has this big shocking reveal or big status quo change, and then the writers just ran out of ideas on what to do with them after that, and just had them go back to square one. Sonic Free Riders is proof of that. Funny enough, I'm perfectly fine with these guys just being the standard anti-heroes. And besides, not everyone needs a deep, in-depth backstory. I really don't have much to say about the new timeline, given the fact that we never saw these guys in action. But given the fact that the new timeline tries to be more faithful to the games, it does raise the question on what Riders games are considered canon in this universe. I know Metro Tech gets referenced in the Champion story arc, where Wes Weasley claims that the industry is now under new non-evil management. And of course there have been plenty of times we've seen Sonic and the others riding around on Extreme Gear, even in the old timeline. But in terms of story elements, I can't really find any concrete answers that confirm certain things. If I were to hazard a guess, I'd say that the first two Sonic Riders games are indeed canon, in some way. And as for Free Riders, well, I guess that would be more of a take it or leave it kind of deal. I'd go with the latter, given the fact that the game barely had much of a story going on. I'm sure most people have experienced going through life sleeping on that one Sonic game, despite the fact that they were around during its prime. For me, yeah, it was the Sonic Riders series. I actually did get the first game, back in the day where you could easily find it at Walmart or Target, but I didn't get very far on it. I think it was because my younger self was too alienated by the gameplay they were going for, as I was more accustomed to the standard kart racing gameplay, like in Crash Team Racing or Looney Tunes Racing, so I didn't bother getting the other games. Maybe I'll give them a second chance once I find some way of playing Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. Oh yeah, and there's also Sonic Free Riders. I ain't gonna bother wasting money on an Xbox console and a Kinect add-on just to play this one exclusive Sonic game. So the only time I'm gonna bother playing that game is through that fan-made version where you can play the whole game with a controller. But right, the Babylon Rogues. I didn't really care for them when they were introduced. I don't know why exactly. I barely got to experience these characters outside of Archie Sonic. Maybe the designs put me off at first. Maybe it was Jason Griffith's voice for Jet in the first game, though admittedly he does sound better in Zero Gravity. Either way, they just came out at a bad time, because I wasn't the only one. From what I remember, the Sonic fanbase really did not like these guys. It was that moment in the 2000s, when people were getting fed up with Sonic games giving us new characters, and believing that they were trying to hog the spotlight, and giving Sonic yet another rival to prove who is the fastest. I definitely remember Jet the Hawk was a popular candidate to show up in top 10 worst Sonic characters lists, as well as becoming the Sonic fanbase's favorite punching bag in fan art and fan videos, just like with other characters at the time, like Cream the Rabbit. But I guess time has been more kind to these guys over the years. They are far from forgotten, as they still occasionally show up in spin-off games, including the new upcoming racing game. And there is a dedicated fan base for Sonic Riders, with all the fan art and fan-made mods and all that jazz. I think I started to change my mind on these guys when Sonic Lost World came out. Yeah, the game that gave us the dull and forgettable Deadly Six. Especially when Sega has been very insistent about trying to keep these guys relevant. So yeah, I guess it's thanks to the Deadly Six that I started to have more respect for the Babylon Rogues. I think they're fine, a nice dark reflection on Team Sonic. Even if they've been given the Mario treatment, where they only show up in spin-off games. Well, at least there's IDW Sonic. Yeah, much like Cream and Vanilla, the Babylon Rogues have become comic-exclusive characters when it comes to having more active roles in the story again. And so far, they've been very active, from taking part in the Metal Virus arc, to having a volleyball match against Tango, Whisper, and Jewel, to going after precious valuables like the Warped Topaz or some ancient statues. And of course their more recent outing in dealing with the Phantom Rider. I imagine their whole backstory with the Babylonian aliens has been largely abandoned, much like how they've abandoned Gun. But hey, at least the Babylon Rogues are treated with more respect now. They may have started out rough in the 2000s, but their future is looking bright. Well, that takes care of this character file, so until then, I got a juice.
Hey look, a shooting star! You must make a wish!
So, did your wish come true?
Nope.
Neither did mine. The new shooting stars! Oh,